Good morning, everybody. Checking in on Instagram. Make sure we got our mic working properly today. Good morning. Let me make sure YouTube is up where it's supposed to be. Yes, we are in here. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, Rumble, X, Facebook. Let's get LinkedIn going in a second. Topic here today. I think all of you can see the topic. It was only on TikTok that they couldn't see the topic. And I am currently based on the way it currently stands, I am suspended from TikTok for a week for hate speech. They said I used hate speech in my live yesterday, so I'm suspended for a week from TikTok. But we are active on all these other platforms, and we are going to have our conversation as usual here for the next, for the foreseeable future, actually. But can't go out on TikTok for until the 31st or the 30th, whatever day that was that I got kicked off. I got kicked off yesterday. So a week from yesterday, which is Thursday, and it was probably about an hour into my live. So probably next Friday, I'll go live again on TikTok. But the topic here today is we're talking about corporate greed versus capitalism. That is the topic. And this is something that I've seen a lot of people talking about over the last. There's always been a conversation. There's always been a conversation in the zeitgeist, simply because a lot of politicians, and I'll get into this once I get into my material, but a lot of politicians do a great job of pushing this idea that the people who are anyone who is not achieving the level of success that they want to achieve or doesn't have the resources that they want to have, the reason must be because some people at the top are controlling everything and they're blocking everybody else from having access to resources. And what they do is they create this us versus them dynamic. So a politician will tell all the people who feel like they don't have enough money, or they can't afford rent, or they can't pay for their groceries, or they feel like they're just not getting ahead enough in life. They'll tell all those people, well, the reason you're not getting ahead is not because of you. It's not because of your personal choices. It's not because of your skill set. It's not because of what you are not bringing to the marketplace. That can't be the reason. The reason has to be that these other people who are dominating everything, and they have all the money, and they have all the success and notoriety and power. Clearly, the only reason that you are being held back is because these people in power are blocking you from the success that you deserve. And all you have to do is follow me and listen to what I say, and I will help solve that problem. And this is how a lot of politicians are able to galvanize audiences and build up followings and win elections, get votes and win elections. This is part of their hustle. And there's also people who are not in politics. This is part of their hustle. They basically pick out the few people who have a lot of success, and then they go to the masses of people who don't have as much success, and they frame it as if the masses are unsuccessful or not as successful simply because the more successful person has caused you to be less successful. This is how you get this whole concept of what they call corporate greed. Now, that does not necessarily mean the corporations cannot be indeed greedy, regardless of what other people think. Can they be greedy? Yes. And we're going to get into that in a second. And then this whole idea of capitalism, what happens is people take this even further into the conversation of, well, capitalism is actually a bad thing because when people are capitalists, they do things that they shouldn't do, all in the pursuit of the almighty dollar. We're going to get into all of this conversation here today. And again, being an active user on social media, especially on X, which is the only app in which I do the back and forth engagement with people like throughout the day, formerly known as Twitter. People talk about social issues all day, every day. And this is one of the ones that's come up a lot, especially recently, and especially over the last 10 years, because you have someone like, actually, we go back 15 years. You all remember the Occupy Wall Street situation. We can't even call it a movement because it didn't go anywhere. You don't call something a movement, it has actually achieved something. Occupy Wall Street achieved nothing except getting the aggrieved individuals who feels like the world is against them, and rich people, quote unquote, whoever they are, the 1%, the billionaires, quote unquote, these are the people holding the 99% back from success. It's a bullshit argument, but it did achieve that. But that's not an actual, no tangible accomplishment. It did get a lot of people thinking that way. And they've been thinking that way for the last 15 years. And then you get Donald Trump's entree into politics. And Donald Trump was known as one of the one percenters himself before he got into politics. So that was something that his political opponents have used against him unsuccessfully, but they tried it for the last 10 years and 3 election cycles that, oh, well, this guy has a lot of money. Therefore, all he's going to do is do things to help people who have a lot of money. And therefore, he's going to bring on a bunch of people who have a lot of money to help him. And all they're going to do is serve themselves, and they're going to be robbing you in the process. And there's a lot of flaws with this argument because, first of all, a lot of people in 99% don't have anything to be taken from you. So how is someone who's a billionaire going to get anything because you ain't got nothing? All right, that's one thing with anybody who considers themselves a victim of the 1%. Or what are they taking from you? You don't really have anything to be taken. And secondly, the people who are in those positions, one of the reasons why they're able to have what they have is because they create opportunities for everybody else. Most people who are in the billionaires category, these people who get talked about, not most of them, 100% of them have done it through some form of entrepreneurship. You cannot make money as an entrepreneur without providing value to other people. It's impossible. It is functionally impossible to make money as an entrepreneur without providing value to other people. There's no way you can do it. Now, you can have a job and get paid without providing any value. You could just be on the payroll and just show up and get your paycheck every 2 weeks, and you're not really adding any value to what's happening. And if the job continues to pay you, then you just keep making your money. But as an entrepreneur, that is impossible. So I'm knocking those down before you even get into my points. But I didn't even get into my points yet. But I heard people using this term corporate greed a lot. You heard this a lot when remember the healthcare CEO guy got shot, maybe what was that, about a month ago up in New York. And then they arrested the guy. A lot of people were saying, well, the corporations are greedy and that's why it's okay for kind of things like that to happen, which is a ridiculous concept that somebody getting killed and you're celebrating it just because you think they make too much money and you don't make enough money, or you don't like the way that the healthcare system is working, is a ridiculous idea. And again, this is all on social media, so it's one thing, but social media, I believe, is actually gradually becoming more of a reflection of how people really think. The problem is, it's one thing to say things and be up about something on the internet. It's another thing to say things and be about something in real life. We're going to get to a little bit of that here today. And again, when people say that a corporation is greedy, it doesn't seem that much different from people simply doing what capitalism encourages us to do, which is running businesses, making money, and generating profits. So I want to try to find the difference between these two terms, and I found some interesting things I'm going to share here in today's live. So introducing myself, for those who don't know me, my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day, former 9-year pro athlete, author of 40 books, done 4 TEDx talks, created this brand called Work on Your Game. It was all about high-level performance done consistently and producing results. You can find out more about that by looking at the links in my profiles or bios or pinned comment wherever you're watching me. I'm on 6 different platforms right now, everywhere except TikTok. Because TikTok has me banned for a week. In case y'all didn't catch yesterday's live, I got kicked off of TikTok for hate speech, quote unquote hate speech. Who knows what I said? They don't tell you what you said wrong, but I got banned for a week from TikTok for hate speech. But I still got the other 6 platforms. So I'm live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Rumble, X, YouTube, and Instagram right now. Is that 6? I think that's all 6. So you can learn more about me and what I do by going to workonyourgameuniversity.com. But add that out the way. Let's get into our points here today. How many do I got? I got a good amount of these, so I got to make sure I don't spend too much time on any one point. So the topic, again, is corporate greed, quote unquote, versus capitalism. So according to ChatGPT, this is what they say. Quote, the distinction between corporate greed and capitalism lies in intent, ethics, and the broader impact of business practices. This is actually a perfect explanation because this makes the distinction between the two completely subjective. And that's what this whole conversation is about. It all comes down to subjectivity. So a person goes out and they start a business and they make a whole bunch of money. One person can look at them and say, well, this person is executing capitalism properly. They made all that money. Congratulations to them. They're a successful business person. Whereas somebody else will look at that exact same person, exact same situation with the exact same outcome and say, well, this person's just greedy. They're just a greedy person just trying to take all the money off the table, and they're wrong and they're bad. And again, this is all subjective based on the views and the point of view of the person who is making the comment, which leads me to my next point. You cannot tell someone what their intents are because, again, according to ChatGPT, they say the distinction between corporate greed and capitalism lies in the intent of the business practices of whatever corporation. Corporation is technically not a person, it's an entity in and of itself. But you can't tell a corporation what they intend to do just by looking at their outcomes. Now, you can judge somebody's outcomes, but you cannot judge someone's intent not accurately because you can't read another person's mind. The whole point of this distinction between the two is that you are judging the intentions of the entity and what they're trying to do. But unless someone tells you this is my intention, and assuming that they're telling you the truth, you can't gauge what another person's intention is. So if a company makes $100 billion and you think they're good, you'll say, well, they're just good capitalists. But if another company makes $100 billion and you think they're bad, you'll say they're just a greedy corporation. What's the difference? The difference is just in the way that you choose to judge subjectively that organization, which doesn't mean that the conversation should not be had. We're having a conversation right now, but it all comes down to subjectivity. There's no objective way to measure what's the difference between one and the other. So the broader impact of business practices, often has a lot to do with many other factors besides just how much money does the company make or what is the company doing. And again, just because a company does something that you don't like doesn't make them bad or greedy. It just means they're doing something that you don't like. You don't have to agree with them, and they don't have to agree with you. And if a company does a bunch of things that you do like, that doesn't mean that they can't possibly still be greedy. Doesn't mean that they can't possibly still be wrong. Doesn't mean that they couldn't possibly still be unethical or breaking the law or something like that. Just because you like what someone is doing does not necessarily mean what they're doing is good. And just because you dislike something that somebody is doing does not necessarily mean that they're wrong. And most people cannot objectively look at things in this way, especially when they're talking about something or a situation in which they are emotionally engaged. So you want a good example of this? Look at someone like Donald Trump. Most people cannot look at him and talk about him in an objective way because most people have strong emotional positions when it comes to him. So if you're super negative on him, it's hard for you to say anything objective about him or even hear somebody say something objective about him because you've already been taught that you're supposed to just trash him at all costs. And even if you like him, you may hesitate to say something positive about him in certain places and in front of certain audiences because you don't want to deal with the potential blowback of a bunch of other people being mad at you for saying, quote unquote, the wrong thing. This is the way most people operate on many subjects. I'm using Trump as an example here. And it's the reason why most people can't have logical and objective discussions about damn near anything, especially when they're emotionally engaged in it, because they hear things they see things, or they think things that they either have been conditioned to hear, think, and say, or they're afraid to share because they don't want to deal with, again, potential blowback. So when it comes to corporate greed and capitalism, people aren't as strongly emotionally engaged on this, but a similar idea exists, which means, I'm not going to bury the lead here, that the main difference between, I already kind of explained this, between corporate greed and capitalism just lies in how the speaker feels about whoever they're talking about. I basically already explained that to you. So is Elon Musk, is he a smart, successful capitalist, or is he a greedy businessman? Which one is he? Is Donald Trump a smart, successful businessman, or is he just some greedy guy who's a billionaire who is just looking to help out his billionaire friends? Which one is it? And depending on who you are and how you choose to look at these individuals, either answer would suffice, and you could probably come up with plenty of evidence, quote unquote, to support your argument. This is the issue with this whole conversation, which is why I'm diving into it. So let me get to my next point. Every business is designed with the idea of creating value because, again, the purpose of a business is to generate profits and to make money for shareholders. Shareholders simply means the people who own a business. So if one person owns a business, you're the shareholder. You own all the shares. If two people own it, then it's two people, or 100 people, or whatever the situation. If you have a public company, then everybody who owns stock owns a certain amount of shares in the business. The purpose of a business is to create value, which means that it must be a money exchange. And the society that we live in has created this belief that anytime someone or something is making a whole lot more money than others, that they must be doing something negative or something wrong or something unethical or nefarious or malicious in order to have more money than everybody else, or they're taking more than their quote unquote fair share. So you've heard a lot of people on the left side politically talk about this for the last 25 years. So Barack Obama pushed it hard. Joe Biden pushed this hard. This whole concept of we got to make sure that people in the top levels of income earning, whether people or entities, they have to pay, quote unquote, their fair share. And again, I told you this at the beginning. This is a great talking point that gets the people who are in the 99%, or people who consider themselves to be in 99%, to be happy, because they feel like, and this just goes to human nature. Most human beings, just backing up here, most human beings do not believe that they can achieve at a super high level. So when they see someone else achieving at a super high level, they do not see a possibility for themselves doing the same thing. So what they do, instead of asking themselves, how can I get to the same level as Elon, or Bill Gates or Donald Trump, what they do instead is they want to craft, and this is the way most people think, they rather craft some negative image of that person, that person must be wrong, bad, or unethical in some way. And that explains why there's such a big gap between you and that person up there. So somehow that person has to be wrong, unethical, bad, malicious, greedy, etc. Putting all these negative terms on people is just a cope. It's a emotional cope that human beings use. And because politicians, at least the good ones, they understand human nature, they understand that if they play into this and they play it up, they can get a mass of people to support them and agree with them and eventually vote for them. And that keeps them, or keeps them in their positions of power as politicians. This is the game that politics is. This is the way that politics works. At least one way that it works is that if I know that most people are not billionaires and most people don't think they could ever become billionaires, all I got to do is come up with a way of framing billionaires as bad guys. And I can position myself as the one who's going to help out the little guy who doesn't have the power of the billionaire. Then I can get all these little guys, because there are so many of them, to support me. They'll vote for me. I'll win the election. And now I'll have a position of power. So the very thing that they're claiming to help you rally against is the very thing they're using you to get themselves into. Again, look at your favorite politicians. It's usually people coming from the left side politically. This is what they do. Listen to what Barack Obama would say for years about people paying their fair share. Listen to what Joe Biden said during his term about people paying their fair share. This is, again, it's a made up concept that works very well simply because when you share a message that aligns with how you share a logical message that aligns with someone's emotional beliefs, they are not going to logically consider whether it makes sense or not. Because logically, if any of you can look this up, it's very easy to find. The majority of the money that the United States government takes in tax revenue comes from the people in the 1%. So when Joe Biden says these people need to pay their fair share, most of the money the government collects in taxes are coming from the people in the top 1%. It's coming from corporations that make hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars every single year. That's where most of the money is coming from. So they are paying a significant amount. They may not pay the same amount, but they are paying a significant amount. The amount that many people in the 1% are paying in taxes is more than like a whole city of people who are not in the 1% are paying in taxes. The whole point being, this is a great emotional ploy that works very well with the average person because, again, most people don't think, they don't read, and they're lazy. So who decides what the fair share is? What is a fair share? Generally, when people, again, usually politicians on the left are talking about the fair share, what they're really meaning is we want to get the support of the masses of people to support us coming up with new ways to take as much money as possible from people who are earning a whole lot more than the average person. What they are looking for is this support. They're looking for public support for this idea, is that we want to take more money from people who have a lot of it, and we want to frame it as if, and here's the trick, they frame it as if taking that money from Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and big corporations like, let's say, a Walmart or an Amazon. What Joe Biden or Barack Obama is telling you is that the more money that you support us taking from these big companies and people, what we're going to do with that money is use it to help you out every single day. We're going to take the money from Elon and we're going to redistribute it and give it to people like the everyday 99% person. The problem is, this has been preached and pushed for 60 years and it has never happened. All right. This whole concept of the trickle down economy and trickle down wealth, which means take the people who are at the top, take more money from them in forms of taxes, and then that money will trickle its way down to the people in the 99%, and your life will be better because we're just taking Elon's money and we're giving it to you in some way, shape, or form, is bullshit. It does not happen. It has been preached for 60 years. It has never occurred. It does not work, but it continues to work to get people to buy into it because, again, people who don't have They look at someone who has an outsized level of success compared to them. They don't see themselves ever being able to get to that level. And if they have an issue with it, they're distraught with that reality that they've chosen, then they will buy into any message that says, let's take from them and give to you. Even though it doesn't happen, people buy into it. And again, people have been buying this lie for 60 years. This is not some new thing. So when Joe Biden said pay your fair share, he did not create that. Barack Obama didn't create it. Politics have been screaming this forever. This is not new in any way, shape, or form. And the next wave of politicians coming around are going to say the same thing. They're already saying it right now. Donald Trump has he's a rich guy, and he got a bunch of rich guys on his team working with him. And all they're going to do is try to help the rich guys out. All it does is actually further the belief that a whole bunch of people have, that people with a whole bunch of money are holding me down and stopping me from being successful. Bullshit. You are stopping yourself. Elon Musk making another $100 million has nothing to do with your ability to make $100 million or $1 million yourself. But again, you making $1 million yourself requires effort, and it requires you looking in the mirror and holding yourself accountable. Whereas on the other hand, if I was to get up and say, well, the reason you don't have $1 million because Elon keeps taking all the money, and he's a greedy corporation guy, and he's a greedy businessman, he's just taking all the opportunity, and he's holding people like you back. Which one is going to be more appealing to the average person? The message that will be more appealing to the average person is the one that tells them it's not your fault, it's not your responsibility. Let me handle it, and I'll do everything. And all of a sudden, you're going to be more successful. You don't have to do any work. Whereas the person who says to them, well, stop bitching, stop complaining about other people having success. You need to take control of your own situation and work on your game, if you will, and do what you need to do to get to a level of success. How many people want to hear a message like that? How many people are open to hearing something like that? Because that sounds like personal accountability. It sounds like personal responsibility. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. It's much easier to just trash the person who has what you don't have. And again, this applies in any aspect. I'm using money here as an example, but it applies to everything. So corporate greed. It is defined as excessive or unethical profit-seeking behavior at the expense of employees, consumers, communities, or the environment. That's how you define corporate greed. Again, excessive or unethical behavior. So these more subjective terms. Who decides what is excessive? And it says unethical profit-seeking behavior. Now, unethical, there are some ways that could be judged in court if someone is unethical, but really that just comes down, again, it's a very subjective way. Something is unethical. And again, profit-seeking at the expense of employees, consumers, communities, or the environment. This is a very tricky wording. Again, some of these can be technically proven in court, but it still becomes a subjective decision because subjectively, who's to tell me that I'm doing something at the expense of my employees? So let's just say that my company is experiencing a downturn and I cut staff. Let's say I had 50 people working for me and now I cut staff. Now I only got 30 people working for me. I fired 20 people. And now my company is profitable again because now I don't have the expense of having to pay the salaries of those 20 people. So now my company's profitable again. My stock price goes up and I get a bonus because the stock price is going up and my company is again profitable. Is that unethical? Is that corporate greed? I asked this question to the audience. Is that unethical to do that? I fired a bunch of people so that we could be in the black again instead of being in the red. And now our company is once again profitable. Our stock price goes up. And now I get a bonus and I look good because the company is doing well again. Is that unethical? I don't think so. I think that's just running a business. This is how it works. Now, I know the employees may be annoyed or mad because they got fired. Well, so people get fired all the time. Getting fired is a part of the game when you have a job. When you have a job, you might get fired. This is just the way that it works. And when you run a business, sometimes you got to make hard decisions, like firing people, like laying people off. Sometimes you had to make these decisions. This is not a reflection of corporate greed, but people will use examples like the one that I just gave you and say that's an example of a company being greedy because they're just focused on their profits and focused on enriching their shareholders rather than focused on doing what's best for their staff. Or I say to that bullshit because the purpose of running a business is to make money. That's the purpose of running a business. The purpose of running a business is to make money and make profits for the people who own the business, i.e. the shareholders. That is the point. So if that means I got to fire some employees to make sure my business is making money, then I'm firing employees. That's how it works. That is not a bad thing. That's not a negative thing. That doesn't make you unethical. It means you are doing what you're supposed to do, playing the rules of the game of business, which is make money. Number one rule in business is don't lose money. Any of you heard, what's the guy's name? Warren Buffett. Says number one rule of investment is don't lose money. I believe that's the number one rule. I think he had 2 rules or 3 rules, but number one rule is don't lose money. Anytime you're running a business, you have to make money. That is the job that you are signed up for. So doing things to seek profit. Again, they define corporate greed as excessive or unethical profit-seeking behavior. Okay. Any business is supposed to be seeking profits. So just the framing of this term alone is problematic because they're making it seem like seeking profit is somehow negative. And this is something I've heard other people talk about, that if you all look around at movies and cartoons and fairy tales and stories that they teach the kids, do y'all notice that the bad guy is always somebody with a whole bunch of money? There's always a rich person, a billionaire, a person who has way more money than everybody else. They're often the bad guy. There used to be this cartoon back in the day called DuckTales. And on DuckTales, there was like 3 little ducks who were running around going through adventures. And then the bad guy was their uncle. His name was Scrooge McDuck. And Scrooge McDuck was this, what do you call him? He was like this ornery uncle who had a whole bunch of money. Now, he was the bad guy. He had a whole bunch of money. In the movie Ocean's 11, remember Ocean's 11? And the bad guy in Ocean's 11, I'm talking about not like the original from back in the 60s, but the one from this century with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all of them. The bad guy was Andy Garcia, right? Andy Garcia was, what was his name? Terry Benedict. Or who was he? He was a bad guy who had a whole bunch of money. All of them had some money, but he was the bad guy with the most money because he was buying everybody's casinos and building new casinos. And he was just the guy who ran all the biggest casinos in Vegas. He was the bad guy, all right, because he had a whole bunch of money. And if you think about it and look around at other stories that you've heard, I don't really watch that many movies, but the bad guy is always somebody with a whole bunch of money. This is conditioning. This is mental conditioning and indoctrination that you get in Western society, that somehow, some way, that if you are seeking profit and trying to make as much money as possible, you are a bad person. And therefore, to be a good person, all you got to do is not seek as much money as possible, be okay being average or destitute or broke or poor. And that makes you a good person, because all the bad guys are the ones with all the money who are holding you back and keeping you from success. This is indoctrination into laziness, mental laziness, emotional laziness, and physical laziness. This is all part of the indoctrination program that many of you are receiving from what Andrew Tate calls it the Matrix. And that's a good way of describing it. That's pretty much what it is. It's the Matrix. And people get conditioned for this. Again, I'm telling you about cartoons and movies that kids watch. You've been learning this stuff since you were 2 or 3 years old. Giving you another example. When I was maybe, I don't know what age I was, let's say 9 or 10, something like that. My family growing up, I had one sister, grew up with both parents at home. We would watch we had a little TV in the kitchen, and we would sit at the dinner table and we would eat dinner. And the news would often be on. And I remember one day the news was on, and people on the news were talking about the Democrats and the Republicans. And by this point, I was old enough to understand that there was a difference between the two of them. They were kind of like opponents. And I remember I asked my mom, I said, and I knew to my parents, they would always vote in every election. Every time there was an election, there was a polling place right across the street from where I grew up. Where I grew up, right across the street, there was a church, and the church would be a polling place. So every time there was an election, both my mom and my dad would make sure they went and voted in every election. So I knew that they were on some side politically. So I asked my mom, are we, meaning our family, are we Democrats or Republicans? And my mom said, Democrats. And then I asked her, well, why are we Democrats? Because I understood there was another side. And she thought about it for a second. And you know what she said? She said, because Republicans only work for the rich people. That's what she said. So that told me a couple things. Number one, that my family definitely was not rich, which I already knew, because my parents would say things like, we're not rich. You think money grows on trees, or we can't afford that. They would use these phrases all the time when me or my sister would ask for certain things. And it also told me that, and I could tell by the way my mom answered the question, that she was thinking of the proper answer to give. I don't think it was that. I think the real answer that she wanted to give was that Democrats are representative of black people, but she didn't want to make it a race thing. I think she just didn't want to put that in my head, and that Republicans work for the white people. I think that's what she really wanted to say, but she didn't say it. And again, just thinking about just the way that she answered the question, the whole point being that Democrats working for the non-rich people is an idea. And my mother and father were born in like the 60s. So my mother and father come from an era where this is what was taught, especially to black people. This is the reason why a lot of black people still vote Democrat to this very day, is because it's been conditioned in a lot of black folks. I can't speak for other groups, but it's been conditioned in a lot of black folks for generations rather, going back decades, that The Democrats are the people who support black people. And if you're black, you got to vote Democrat because they're going to help you. They're going to help people who are not rich. And the Republican side is just for the rich people and the white people. There are a whole bunch of black people in the United States of America who still think this way to this very day, which is why in every election since I've been paying attention, let's just say the last 25 years, the black vote goes largely to the Democratic candidate. Even Kamala, who was a terrible candidate and should not have been there in the first place, she still got the majority of the black vote. Even though people were like, what females think she got like 96% of black female votes, but even male votes, she didn't get as many black male votes as, let's say, Barack Obama got, but she still got the majority. I think it was somewhere in the, what was it, like 80, 90th percentile, something like that. She got a black male vote. It wasn't close. It wasn't close to half and half. Most of the votes still went to Kamala because black people have been conditioned and taught this for decades. And the whole point being that when companies are doing what they're doing to make money, it is often framed that they're doing something wrong, they're doing something bad, simply because they are making money, because a lot of people have been conditioned to believe that someone doing something to make money must make them wrong. Therefore, to be right and to be righteous and to be virtuous means you shouldn't try to make money. This is the reason why a lot of people don't make money. A lot of people don't make money because you have been conditioned to believe that doing things to try to make money is somehow wrong. It is somehow greedy. It is somehow negative. It is somehow bad. If you have that stuck in your head, this is what any of you who's done any study on finance or sales or entrepreneurship, we know we talk about this. It's called your money mindset. If you have a poor money mindset, it doesn't matter what opportunities are put in front of you. You will find a way to sabotage your ability to make money because you've been conditioned that making money is somehow bad. If you believe making money or seeking profit or trying to make as much money as possible is somehow bad, you will find ways to sabotage your own money-making opportunities. Again, just like my mother said, we're Democrats because the Republicans only work for the rich people. If I was old enough and had enough brain development at the time to counter her question, and if I came from a household where that was accepted, that was not accepted, and I didn't understand it back then, but if I was able to go back to that conversation now with current knowledge intact, I would have said, well, why don't we try to become rich? Why don't we become Republicans and try to become rich? Right? Isn't rich better than not rich? I don't know what you call not rich. Whatever that was, we were that. And generally, I come from a lower middle class background. But why don't we just try to become rich? Republicans work for the rich people. Well, let's find out what the rich people are doing and become that. Well, we want to stay here. We want to stay not rich. And again, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense. It sounds silly, right? When I break it down this way. But this is the way a whole lot of people think. A whole lot of people go through their entire lives thinking like this. I would bet my parents probably still think like this to this very day. But let's move on. So companies laying off employees because they need to do it to protect their profits or to keep the business afloat is not a negative thing. Of course, it feels negative if you're the employee who got laid off or fired or downsized or outsourced. I get it. I get your personal experience is that didn't feel good, but that doesn't make the company bad for laying you off because the company's responsibility is to the company. Their responsibility is to the shareholders. That is the purpose of business. And this is an ethical challenge that a lot of people would have to what I'm saying, because I'm saying that a business's responsibility is to their shareholders, where somebody else might counter and say, well, no, Dre, a business's responsibility is to the community and the people who they serve and to their teams. I say, no, it's not. The purpose of running a business is to make money. And who makes the money when a business makes money? The people who own the business, i.e. the shareholders. Those can be people who own stocks. It can be a sole proprietor. It can be a partnership, whatever the situation is. That is the responsibility of a business. And if that means we got to fire 20 people in order to make sure that we continue to make money, then that doesn't make them wrong. I'm not saying they have to do it every time. Some companies will take a loss for a short period because they decided that they want to prioritize, let's make sure everybody keeps their jobs. They're not wrong for doing that, and they're also not wrong if they made the opposite decision and said, we're going to fire half our staff so we can keep making money. That's the game that you get in. If you decide to accept employment somewhere, you understand that most employment is at will employment, which means a company can get rid of you for any reason or for no reason at all. Even if that reason happens to be, we got to fire you so we can keep making money. That doesn't make them bad. And it doesn't make you a victim. It's just what the situation is. It's just a situation. In life, there are no perfect scenarios. There are only trade-offs. And every situation that happens in life is not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. The way we choose to look at it, often emotionally, is how we end up framing it as a bad thing or a good thing. But it's just a thing, generally what it is. Consumers, all of us are consumers. right? We all buy stuff. We see prices go up all the time. Again, think what prices were for you 25 years ago versus what prices are now. Prices are always going up. This is just a normal thing, inflation. I did a whole live stream on this concept of inflation and why the middle class is disappearing. If you haven't seen it, you can find it on YouTube. And everything in life has some form of trade-off. Not everything has a trade-off. This means somebody has to pay for everything. So if I'm running a business and I see that my staff is bloated and I'm losing money as a business, I could say I'm going to do the good and noble thing that'll make me look good on social media. I'm not going to fire anybody, and I'm just going to eat this loss that my business is taking right now for the next 6 months. The trade-off of that is that I'm not making any money. Trade-off is that I'm losing my profits. If, on the other hand, I decide to fire half my staff so I can keep making money, the good part about it is I keep making money. The bad part about it is I might get trashed on the internet, and somebody says, well, Dre, he's just a greedy businessman who fired half his staff just so he could protect his profits. So I would say, so? I run a business. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to protect my profits. That doesn't make me a bad guy. Again, you may disagree with it. You disagreeing with what I'm doing does not make me bad, and me disagreeing with what you do doesn't make you bad, nor does it make you right to be on the other side of it. But this is what a lot of people do. As I already explained to you all, most human beings are controlled more by their emotions than they are by their logic. So if something appeals to them emotionally, even if it does not logically make sense, most people will buy into it. This is the reason why. Look around in politics. Most of what you hear politically, the political rhetoric that you hear these days is mostly focused around emotions. It is not focused around logic, because logic requires thinking, and thinking is effort. It's much easier to just buy into something emotionally because you don't have to really think to buy into something emotionally. Emotion, any type of emotion, bypasses the logical centers of the brain. So any of you, especially those of you who are in sales, and everybody's in sales actually, but if you want to be better at persuading and influencing human beings, you need to figure out how to tap into and trigger people's emotions. Because when you do that, they don't think logically. So if you want people to not think at all, you just want to get them to do stuff without thinking whatsoever, learn how to trigger people's emotions. Politicians are great at this. No politician can win an election without getting good at triggering emotions. Obama was great at it. Trump was great at it. Kamala sucked. She tried, but she sucked. Hillary tried. She sucked. Joe Biden was not very good. I think that was much more of actually the last three Democrats you've seen, Hillary, Biden, Kamala, all their emotional trigger was, I'm not Donald Trump. That's all they had to do. But when Trump is out of there, we'll see if they come with somebody who has some actual skills, such as Barack Obama had actual skill. Hillary Clinton was okay. Joe Biden was not good, and Kamala was trash. So they got to come with somebody with some actual skill in 2028, because they can't use the I'm not Donald Trump anymore, because Trump won't be there anymore. Moving on. So actually continuing on this last point that I just made, when does the line get crossed from doing smart business into greed? Again, I've said this already like 5 times here. It's based on the emotions and feelings of the person who's looking at the situation. That's it. That's all it comes down to. Corporate greed versus capitalism is all based on, the difference between the two is just the feelings and emotions of the person who's looking at the situation and what they want to say. As you hear me explaining it logically, there is no difference. It's just how you want to look at it. Whereas somebody else will say, no. A person is really greedy if they do this, this, and this. That's bullshit. No, they're not. So the simple answer, as I just told you, it just depends on who's talking. That's why this concept is much more subjective than it is a provable fact. When someone calls you greedy, they're using it as a pejorative to frame your behavior as negative, not because you actually did something that is factually wrong, but simply because you're doing something that they wouldn't do, and they're trying to make you look bad, at least in their own minds, by putting a negative label on you. So they say that corporate greed, by definition, is about short-term thinking, prioritizing immediate profits over long-term sustainability or societal well-being, or they use terms such as affordability or maximizing shareholder returns. The problem with all of these is that, number one, you cannot judge another person's intentions. You cannot read another person's mind. So you can't tell someone that they're thinking short-term just because they got a short-term positive outcome. If I do something that gets me a short-term positive outcome right now, that doesn't mean that my thinking is short-term. Maybe it just means I want to do something today. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. It does not mean I don't have a long-term strategy or a long-term plan. Because again, how would you know if you're not talking to me? And what if I tell you I do have a long-term plan, but at the same time, I'm doing something that's going to help me in the short term? Does that make me wrong? Does it make me bad? Does it mean I'm only thinking short-term when I just told you I have a long-term and a short-term plan, which most people should have anyway? All right. How is this corporate greed? Again, that's why these definitions are so tricky, because they play around with these terms. So they say someone is prioritizing immediate profits. Again, there's nothing wrong with making profit. I run a business. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to make profits. So I can make profits tomorrow. I can make profits today. What if I make profits today and tomorrow? Am I prioritizing immediate profits, or is that long-term profits? Again, I'm breaking all this down for all of you to help you understand that people will just play around with these terms, and it's all of this is subjective. All of it is subjective and based on how people are looking at things. And they use things like sustainability and societal well-being. This is another one of these tricky terms. Societal well-being. Who is the judge of if what I'm doing is good for society or bad for society? For example, yesterday when I was doing the same live stream on all these platforms I'm here, plus TikTok, I'm banned from TikTok for a week. But on TikTok, I was questioning why this bishop in a church, first of all, how a woman became a bishop in a church, and secondly, why she was pushing and advocating for LGBTQ stuff in the church. Now, let me ask you a question. Am I pushing societal well-being by questioning that, or am I going against it? And the answer is it depends on who you are in your position. If you agree with LGBTQ being in the church, then you would say, then what I was doing was hate speech, and TikTok had a right to ban me because I was doing hate speech. That's what TikTok says. It was hate speech. Whereas somebody else, and there was a bunch of people who were listening to me yesterday who heard me and said, well, what you're saying is absolutely correct. And they were co-signing it and liking it and saying, well, I like the way you think, and I like the way that you're breaking things down. Who's right and who's wrong? Everything is subjective, everybody. That's the thing that I want you all to understand. And when you go to schools and you hear from professors and you hear from politicians on the internet or on TV, they often make things seem like they are objectively one way or another. And again, this is their game. This is their hustle. This is what they have to do. They have to do that because that's their job. So don't be mad at them when you realize, or if you're realizing right now, don't get mad at them for doing this. They're doing what they have to do because this is their business. The business of a politician is to frame things as if there's only one way of looking at it, and this must be right, and you must follow me. They do it on both sides of the aisle. Teachers tend to do this. Professors tend to do this. People who are quote unquote experts at things, they tend to do this. Why? Because getting people hard on one side of a conversation is profitable for business. So even though they are misleading you by not being logical and not being objective, they are doing what they have to do to make sure they keep getting their paycheck and they keep making their money in their business. So are they greedy, or are they just smart capitalists? So the very people telling you these things are actually doing the exact same thing that they're arguing against. And again, this is the reason why a lot of these people don't want to have back and forth conversations with me, because once they realize that I can break it down, I can explain it in this way, they get out of the conversation because they know I'm going to expose them for their bullshit. This is why I'm doing all this, not to expose them. I'm doing all this to inform you, so that when people come to you with these arguments that are actually circular arguments, if you can unravel what they're doing, you'll realize that it's a circular conversation. It doesn't seem circular on the surface because they're really good at hiding that. But when you can understand it and break it down, then you realize what they're doing. Then they can't manipulate you as easily. You might still get manipulated, but it's not as easy to manipulate you. So all these very subjective terms, be very careful when people start throwing them out, because people will throw them out. And then what they'll do is they'll put an emotional wrapping paper around the point, so that if you were to challenge it or disagree with it, it makes it seem as if you're a bad person. How could you not agree with this point that I just made? But look at this emotional example that I'm giving you. You want an example of this? Look at what just happened at the southern border of the United States just this week. When Donald Trump and his new administration decided that they were going to shut down that CBP app and stop letting people just get into this country and get legal status so easily and so quickly, they were showing videos on social media of these migrants who were allegedly trying to come into the country. They were showing videos of these people distraught and crying at the border because they were no longer going to have their appointment to possibly get into the country. And it's like this heart-wrenching thing that they were putting on social media and saying, well, look at this, everybody. Donald Trump is blocking these migrants who have dreams and hopes to come into America. He's stopping them from coming into the country. Well, he is, but that doesn't make him wrong, because we have laws when it comes to immigration. And if he chooses to enforce the law, then that doesn't make him wrong. And if you try to come here and you don't have proper documentation, and we say no, the United States says, no, you can't come here, doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make the United States wrong. It means we're enforcing our laws, which is what we're supposed to do. But again, it sounds a whole lot colder to say it that way, then it sounds a whole lot softer and warmer to say, well, why don't we just let people in because they have hopes and dreams and they want to come here and aspirations. Isn't that what Kamala said? Hopes, dreams, and aspirations. So the phrase she kept using over and over again. See, that is emotionally appealing. And most human beings are much more driven by their emotions than they are driven by logic. This is the reason why someone like Kamala, with her tired message that didn't really make logical sense, was able to galvanize so many people to support what she was saying. Now, with a caveat that there were only 2 options. So again, if there were 10 options, she wouldn't have came in second. She would have came in much closer to 10th. But being that there were only 2 options, she still was able to galvanize a bunch of people to support her because she had an emotional message. Most people are much more driven by emotions than they are by logic. So the next point is that a consumer not being able to afford a product does not make the company who is selling the product greedy. If I'm selling a product and you can't afford it at its price, it doesn't mean I'm wrong. Maybe it just means you need to go make some more money. Possibly. I mean, that's not always the case, but that needs to be put on the table. So who's the judge of whether a company is greedy or not? Again, usually people only call someone greedy when that person or entity is doing something that you can't do, or they have something that you don't have, or they're willing to take actions that you're not willing to take to get a certain outcome that you have not achieved. That's when we start throwing the word greedy out there. If a company is gaining short-term profits, does it make them greedy? Again, if a company is taking advantage of an opportunity, does it mean that they're wrong? No, it doesn't. And people are allowed to take advantage of opportunity. As a matter of fact, you are encouraged to take advantage of opportunity when you're an entrepreneur, because it is your job to make money. Again, I've said this a bunch of times. I'm going to keep saying it. When you run a business, it is your job to make money. If that means raising your prices, then raise your price. And that means somebody can no longer afford your price because you have raised the price. That is not your problem necessarily, because if you're able to keep making money at a higher price, then that just means some people got priced out of the game. So am I responsible for the fact that you can't afford my higher price? No, I'm not responsible for that. Now, if I raise my price and I'm not making any sales, then I might need to lower my price again. But I'm making the decision about price based on what serves me, not what serves you. Because I'm not in the business of necessarily pleasing every single person. I'm in the business of pleasing the people who I want to please, the people who I want to serve at the price that makes the sense for me and the price that makes sense for you. That's my job as a business. It's not my job to serve everybody just because they want access. That's not the way it works. And again, most people, if you were to give them the truth serum and remove emotion from the conversation, most people would agree with everything that I'm saying here, but most people cannot agree with this on a normal basis, because most people are much more tied into their emotions than they are tied into their logic. That's the problem. So how do we know? Also, because this definition of corporate greed talks about long-term sustainability. How do you know if someone's short-term action leads to long-term sustainability? Well, there's only one way to know, and that means you would have to pay attention to them over the long term to find out if action that happened here actually pays off down there down the road. Now, let me ask you a question. How many people do you know who have the patience and the discipline to actually watch something over an extended period of time, as opposed to judging it in the snapshot and just coming to a conclusion and never thinking about it ever again? Most of you probably don't know more people than you can count on your damn hand who have that type of discipline. Most people don't have that discipline. Most of your favorite politicians don't have that discipline. Your favorite academics don't have that discipline. People you see on TV do not have that discipline, because it requires effort and it requires controlling your emotions, which means not reacting in the moment to something that happens, but instead noting what happened. Let's look at the long term of this, and then let's come to a conclusion 6 months from now or 5 years from now. How many people do you know do that? Most people can't do that with their own lives, let alone can they do it for somebody else. Most people don't have that kind of discipline for themselves, let alone do they have that kind of discipline watching anyone who's not them. So again, these terms sound good, and these are all things that people will put into their arguments to convince you that their way of looking at things must be the right way of looking at things. And all you got to do when any people present you things like this is ask them, what's the counter argument to your position? What does someone who disagrees with you say, and what's your response to them? Most people cannot answer that question. I was just talking to somebody on X yesterday, and I asked them this exact thing. If someone disagreed with you, what would they say, and what do you say to that? And they couldn't answer the question, because they never even considered that somebody could possibly disagree with what they were saying, even though they've been making the same argument for 5 years and haven't been able to prove it, haven't been able to get anyone to go along with it, yet they can't tell me what the counter argument is, which makes no sense. It means this person's not a critical thinker. Most people are not critical thinkers. So moving on. Another thing in the chat GPT definition says doing things such as making unfair advantages or misleading consumers. All right, that is the definition of corporate greed. Then every corporation is greedy because every corporation may do some misleading of consumers, and every business lobbies for unfair advantages. I'll let you all know right now, as a business owner, I look for and lobby for unfair advantages all day, every day. I want as many unfair advantages as possible. Why? Because when I have an unfair advantage, that means I can defeat my competition much more easily. All of you should be looking for unfair advantages, even if you don't run a business. If you're in the workforce, you should look for unfair advantages. What is an unfair advantage? It's a situation that you ethically have. Again, you're not breaking the law or violating anybody else's rights, but you ethically have an advantage that's in a position to be more successful than other people. Life is a competition, ladies and gentlemen. You should be looking for unfair advantages and exploiting unfair advantages all the time. Simple example. Before I started playing basketball, I used to play baseball. The problem is in baseball, I didn't have as much of an advantage over my peers, my competition, than I had in basketball. In basketball, I had more advantages and there was more potential for me to be successful as a basketball player than there was for me to be successful as a baseball player. Why? Because my natural physical attributes and just personal skills were more geared towards being successful on a basketball court than on a baseball field. So should I have done the right thing, quote unquote, and stayed playing baseball so it would be more even between me and the competition? Hell no. The smarter thing for me to do is go play basketball because I have more advantage in basketball than I have in baseball. Everybody understand this? And it's the same thing with all the rest of you and what you do professionally. You need to go to the place where, based on your natural attributes and skills and talents, you have the most opportunity to be as successful as possible. If you don't like talking to people, you don't like being in people's faces, you don't like shaking hands and dealing with human beings on a consistent basis, do not get a sales job, because that's what you have to do when you're in sales. You're talking to people all the time. You're having conversations. You're looking people in the face. You're shaking hands, and you're having back and forth engagement all day, every day. If you don't like talking to people at all, you'd rather be on a computer, not engaging and not being bothered by anyone, learn how to code and sit on a computer with your headphones on and stare at a computer screen all day. That is more geared towards your natural attributes and your natural aptitudes. And that's looking for an advantage. All right. That is what you're supposed to be doing. So look for the advantages and look for the opportunities that best serve you. And any business looking to do that does not make them greedy. It makes them smart, or greedy in a negative way. See, most people frame greed as this negative thing. Greed is not a bad thing. If you play a sport and you won the championship last year and you want to win it again this year, does that make you greedy because you're trying to win the championship again? No, it means you're competitive and you want to win as much as possible, which is the point of sports. If you're in business and you made money last year, you made $10 million in profit last year, and you want to make $20 million in profit this year, does that make you greedy because you're not okay with 10 million? No, it means you're doing what you're supposed to do in business, which is get better, improve, and make money. So again, all of you need to be careful when people start throwing these phrases out here, these emotionally charged phrases, to make it seem like somebody's doing something wrong, and they eventually are going to turn it on you. So angling for unfair advantages, again, is one of the elements of capitalism. Now, could there be drawbacks to that? The answer is yes. When everybody's angling for an unfair advantage, sometimes people will do things that are unethical or even illegal just to get or maintain an unfair advantage. But we have laws for handling those kind of things. But when you're looking for an unfair advantage, this is what you're supposed to do, because again, if you want to win, you want to put yourself in the best position to possibly win, right? So an unfair advantage might be if I have a basketball team and I got a chance to get whoever the best player in the world is, or I got a chance to get Michael Jordan on my team, I'm angling for an unfair advantage. Is that a bad thing? No, that's smart. Because if I get the best player on my team, that gives me a much better chance of winning, because now I have an unfair advantage over the other teams that I can beat. Unfair. Let's talk about that word right there. Fair is subjective. What is fair and what's not fair is determined by the person who has the power. So, for example, when you were a kid and you're 10 years old and your mom or your dad tells you to clean your room before you can watch TV, you might think that's unfair. You might say, well, my sister got to watch TV before they cleaned their room. And your parents says, so what? And you say, well, that's not fair. And they'll say, so what? Why? Because they got the power. And this is the way it works in life, folks. If you want to decide or you want to wax poetic about what's fair and what's not fair, you got to put yourself in a position of power and influence to where you call the shots. If you're in a position where somebody else calls the shots over you, then what you think is fair, you can offer it. But ultimately, if the person who has the power decides that your idea of fair doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. If you want your opinion to matter, you got to put yourself at the top spot, which means you might have to take some risk. Which is what an entrepreneur does. An entrepreneur is a person who takes on or runs a business entity while taking on greater than normal financial risk. That's the definition of an entrepreneur. And the reason why many people become entrepreneurs, because a lot of my coaching clients are people who have just started as entrepreneurs or have always been entrepreneurs, is that they don't like being in a position where they don't have the power. But if you want to have the power, you got to take the risk. That's the trade-off. The trade-off of having power is that you got to take all the risk and responsibility. And the trade-off of having safety is that you got to give up power and give up influence. So the question is, which one do you want? It's up to you. You can pick, but understand you do have to make a choice, and there is a trade-off. So they say what a lot of the definitions about corporate greed say is that corporate greed leads to economic inequality. All right, that's bullshit. That's not true. Economic inequality is not because of corporate greed. Economic inequality is because of the difference between people and the decisions that human beings make. You cannot manufacture equality. There's no such thing as equality being manufactured. In other words, you cannot create movements and ideas and political campaigns and laws and executive orders and policy that if you put all the perfect policies and laws in place, that there will come a day when everything is equal. That will never happen. There will never be equality. There will never be equity. Why? Because human beings get to make their own personal choices. If America was to decide to give $1 million in cash to every single American citizen right now today, within 5 years, all the people who were poor before will be poor again. All the people who were broke will be broke again. All the people in middle class will be middle class again. And all the people who were rich will be even richer than they were before. Why? Because each human being, even though you gave everybody the same amount of money, we all get to make our own decisions with that money. And based on the decisions that we make, we end up where we end up. In the long run of life, people end up where they want to be based on the choices that they make. Therefore, you cannot manufacture equality amongst people because people keep making their own choices. Only way you can create equality is if you strip away human choice. In other words, we had to have like a bot simulation life of humans. They couldn't be real humans because real humans get to think for themselves. They had to be AI humans who are programmed to think a certain way. And hey, we may have that type of world in 100 years. You never know. But this whole idea that inequality is created by the highly successful people doing things that stop the less successful people from doing something else is a complete farce. It's nonsense. Again, the fact of the matter is capitalism rewards greed. It rewards people who go after getting as much as they possibly can. So if you want to get more in your life, you need to be conscious and intentional about getting more, not bitching about people who have more. You need to ask yourself how they do it. What are they doing? How do they think is different from the way I think? And you need to start adopting those things, not complaining about them. And last point, greed is good. Greed is a good thing. Greed simply means going after more of the things that you want. What's wrong with that? People look at greed as a bad thing simply because they have not taken advantage of the very concept and they want to put the spotlight on those who have. And again, not a bad thing to be greedy, not a bad thing to go after getting as much as you want. So I'm not even afraid of this whole concept of greed, period. Same way I'm not a fan of things like corporate social responsibility. Just because someone or something has a lot more than everyone else does not mean that they are ethically required to do something to help you. If they want to, fine. If a person has billions of dollars and they want to give back via charity, or they want to give trust funds, or they want to give scholarships to people to go to college from the hood, if they want to do that, fine, great, amazing. Get them a plaque, get them an award, put it on TV. But if they don't want to do that, it doesn't make them wrong. If you were to go make $1 billion today, you are not required on Monday to go and start giving money back to everybody else. And first of all, you're not giving back, first of all, because they didn't give it to you in the first place. So this whole concept of people get something, they say, I want to give back. I want to give back to the hood. I want to give back to the community. I want to give back to other people. You can't give something back that was never given to you in the first place. So someone like Bill Gates, he's made himself known as a person who is quote unquote giving back by having all these charities and all the things that he does, whatever it is that he has going on. The thing is, Bill Gates didn't become rich because a whole bunch of people gave him something. He became rich because he created a business. He created opportunities that people were willing to pay to get access to those opportunities, and he earned his money. They didn't give it to him. He earned it. I sold you Windows 95. You paid $100 for it. That's a fair exchange. I was willing to pay $100. You were willing to give me the product. You didn't give me anything. I didn't give you anything. Therefore, you don't owe me anything back. But a whole lot of people buy into this concept. Oh, this person has a bunch of whatever they got to give back. Like when they had those fires in California over the last couple of weeks, I would see on social media, people would say this. They would say, well, this company gave this much and this company gave this and this person gave this much to like donated the money. And then they said, well, this person, Donald Trump, he only gave this much and Mark Zuckerberg didn't give enough. He only gave this much. It's not, first of all, it's not your call what somebody else does with their money. Just because they got a lot of it doesn't mean you have a say in what they do with it. Secondly, if you have money, it is not anybody else's call to say what you need to do with the money. If you became a billionaire tomorrow, a lot of people are going to have a whole lot of opinions of what you're supposed to do with your money just because it's yours and just because you got a lot of it, not because it's yours, but because you have a lot of it and they don't have it. They think they have a right to say what you're supposed to do with your money. But person making 50 grand a year, nobody's allowed to say what they're supposed to do with their money. What's the difference? Just because you got a lot of it, now other people get to have, well, it's human nature. People are going to have an opinion just because you're out there. If you're out there, people are going to have an opinion on you. Put yourself on Front Street, you're going to get people going to have opinions. And when you're known for anything, people are going to have opinions of you. Some of those opinions will be negative. That's just the nature of the beast and the way that it works. But I'm letting all of you know, any of you who is not, let's say, a billionaire, just because somebody else has a whole bunch of money does not mean you have a right to say anything about what they do with their money. Again, do they have a right to say what you do with your money? What's the difference? All right, they earn what they have, you earn what you got. Why do you have a right to theirs? A right to talk about theirs? What? Just because they got a lot of it? Why? What's the difference? If you have a lot less than somebody else, do they have a right to talk about what you got? No, because you don't have that much. But if they have a lot, then you have a right to speak on it. What's the difference? Again, I don't understand. If there is a difference, the answer is there isn't a difference. That's the whole point. And this is the reason why no one has an answer to that. And this is the reason why this whole concept of corporate greed, someone being greedy just because they got a lot of something and people thinking they have a right to tell them what they're supposed to do is bullshit. All that said, let me answer a couple questions and comments here. If anybody has any, go ahead and post it. I didn't see a ton. TikTok usually gives me my most questions and comments. I'm not on TikTok. I told you I'm banned for a week from TikTok. So my comments section of these live streams will be shorter, at least for the week. Above the Surge says, do you play ball still? No, I stopped playing ball a while ago. Carla said you missed tapping TikTok. Me too. So hopefully after a week, my appeal was rejected on TikTok and it pretty much nothing else I can do. So yeah, I can't go back live on TikTok till technically next Thursday, but I probably won't do it again until next Friday. So we'll have all of next week or most of next week. I'll still be going live. I'll just be over here on YouTube and hopefully the people over on TikTok, not the app, but the actual users, people who follow me on TikTok will see. Let me see. People who follow me on TikTok will see what I posted and they'll come over here. So I get it, Carla. Sorry. Nothing I can say about it. Sorry for being so hateful in my speech yesterday on TikTok. I'm joking, but that's pretty much what happened. So, but everybody, I do these live streams Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. I will still be doing my lives next week. The topics are to be determined. I'll decide each day what exactly I'm going to talk about, but I will still do these lives. I start at 8 o'clock, usually go till about 9, depending on the comments. I'll usually go to about 9:30, maybe even 10 o'clock, depending on the subject and depending on how many comments. But usually the content is about an hour, like I just did here today. And I got some things that I might hold on to until I get the full audience back because I want to make sure everybody hears these things. But again, I might get kicked off the TikTok again, depending on what I'm talking about, how I talk about it. By the way, while you are here, if you're not on my email list, get on my email list for free by going to workonmygame.com. I'm going to put it in here over on those of you who are watching on YouTube. I'll put the link in there, workonmygame.com to get, let me see if I hyperlink it. Will you all actually be able to click on it? I don't know. Let me try. Yeah, I think, you can click on it. All right. So I just put it in there I think you can click on it. Try to click on that. Y'all can see workonmygame.com. You want to work with me directly, get into my coaching programs, have access to me as your personal coach. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. What else is there? I already told you I'll do the lives Monday through Friday. So today's Friday. I'll be back live on Monday. And again, topic to be determined, usually is a current event or a social issue like what I talked about here today. And I'm trying to think what else that I did not tell you all. I would tell you, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel just in case TikTok kicks me off. So TikTok kicked me off yesterday. So all of you who are on my YouTube, shout out to y'all for being here on YouTube. All my replays, by the way, anything that I tell you that I've done already in the past, The replay will be on my YouTube channel. There's a playlist called Current Events and Social Issues and all that political stuff, news. All of that stuff is on YouTube. So y'all can catch the replays of all of those things on my YouTube channel, which is YouTube/@DreB, or just look my name up, Dre Baldwin, on YouTube. I already told you about Work on Your Game University. I put a link to that in there as well. Workonmygame.com. Get on my email list completely for free. And I don't think I have anything else to announce. And if you want one of my books, I'll give you a link to one of my books. My most popular book right now is The Third Day, thirddaybook.com. Get a free copy of it. That's that red book you see right behind me right there. Free copy, The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs. I'm about to ship a bunch of those out here this weekend to new orders that came through. So you can get your name on there. Get your name in our shipment list, and we'll be shipping that book out to you. And I think I covered everything, everybody. So this replay will be up on YouTube probably as soon as I end this. Check the playlist to catch all the ones that I've done in the past. And then Monday morning, I'll be back here. Don't know what I'm going to talk about, but I got plenty of material. I never run out of material. I've been doing this for 20 years online, from the basketball to the mindset to the business to the current events and wherever it goes in the future. As long as I can speak, as long as the internet exists, as long as I don't get kicked off the internet, I will be here. So y'all stay tuned. Everybody have a great Friday. Work on your game. We are out of here.